Howdy folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and I appreciate you tuning in today. I have on the line Mr. Dave Kranzler. You probably know him as Dave from Denver, and you know his work from truthingold.com. Dave just recently launched a new website called investmentresearchdynamics.com, and that's where you'll find his work at today. Dave and I are in the middle of a fireside chat, and we're going to let you listen in. You're going to hear topics such as the forthcoming or the ongoing, I should say, economic collapse, the state of our economy in general, the creeping police state, Germany's gold, Ukraine's gold, precious metals in general, and a host of other topics. I'm glad you tuned in today because I think that you're going to find this rather entertaining and hopefully informative. We're going to join the conversation in progress, so let's get started, and here we go. Thank you very much. I have a two-part question regarding Ukraine and Germany, and this goes back to the article that you wrote about a week or so ago that we cited with Mr. McLeod. And the U.S. Treasury, Federal Reserve, which to me is one and the same, has agreed to give Germany their gold back. The German authorities accepted a 7-year plan to deliver a paltry 300 tons, with it being reported that Blackwater was on the ground in Ukraine at the same time the Ukrainian gold went missing. What are the odds that the missing Ukrainian gold is actually in Germany? And will Germany ever get their gold back without a war?
The first part of your question in terms of where did the Ukrainian gold go, unfortunately, there's no way of knowing. My initial thinking was that it was gold that was going to be used to deliver into China, because I think a default to Germany is not a big deal, right? They're allies of ours. They're political, economic allies, military allies. So. And then that's what we saw when Germany asked for their gold back. They originally wanted more than 300 tons, and then the request disappeared from the headlines for a while. And then I don't remember the exact timing. 10 days or 2 weeks later, all of a sudden this deal was announced for 300 tons over 7 years, and everyone who does what we do was like, right. The gold's not there to send back, and obviously that was confirmed by the reports that they've only received 5 tons, and it wasn't even in bar form. It had to be recast into LBMA standard bars. Yeah. But if we default to China, that's the recipe for a war. China's not going to capitulate on a default like that, and so without having proof of knowing exactly where the gold went, my first thought was that it ended up in China. Now, it very well could have ended up in Germany, and it'll be interesting we'll know, because at some point Germany is going to have to make another report on how much gold's been delivered. Yeah. So we'll know, and then then we'll understand what the ultimate destination was for that gold. What was interesting to me that was kind of lost all of this is that when the U.S. went into Libya, Libya's gold disappeared as well. So who knows where it went? I think it went to China. I think that there is such a shortage of gold that is available to meet China's demand that, Libya's gold went there. And if you recall, Goldman tried to get Venezuela to cough up the gold that Chavez had repatriated. I don't know if you remember this, but about 2 months ago, Goldman made this big press release that they were about ready to reach a gold lease agreement with Venezuela.
Yes, I do remember that.
On the 160 tons that Venezuela repatriated.
Yes.
And Venezuela came out shortly after that and said, no, we never agreed to this.
Don't know what you're talking about.
And I'm convinced that was Goldman on behalf of the U.S. government going in there and trying to get Venezuela to cough up their gold on a lease deal so they could ship it to China.
So you would agree that there is no gold either in A, the COMEX, or B, the LBMA?
Well, I think both are very highly fractionalized system, and in fact, I'm in the process I put out a report on GLD back in '09, talking about how fraudulent it was, and I'm in the process. It's going to take a lot of time to do it, but I'm updating it, and I'm going to make it a little more in depth and a little more comprehensive. I think that the entire Western gold system is highly fractionalized. So I think at any given time, if the COMEX were to be audited, I think that they would actually have the amount of unencumbered physical gold sitting in the COMEX vaults that they're reporting is sitting in the vaults. Now, that's not to say that the bars may or may, the bars may well be sitting there, but are they encumbered by leases? And it's
Yes.
the same issue with the Fed's gold. It's starting to look like the Fed's gold isn't even there, which is what I had originally thought way back when I started in on the precious metals back in late 2001. And occasionally they show pictures of gold sitting in Fort Knox or whatever. I mean, it's pure propaganda.
Pure propaganda.
Yeah, the gold may be there, but can we please see whether or not there's leases attached to it? And that's the type of information that GATA tried to get at when they filed their Freedom of Information suit against the Fed, and the Fed spent a ton of money to squash the suit. So to me, it's just, all the dotted lines, and I don't even think they're really dotted lines anymore. To me, it's pretty clear that the gold that's being represented is being owned by the Federal Reserve or sitting in the COMEX or sitting in the LBMA. It's not really there.
And I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I don't think the Federal Reserve has had any of our gold that belongs to you and I. I don't think that they've had it for a number of years. I think it's been gone for a very long time.
Probably since the late '60s, which is why Nixon had to close the gold window.
Yes, that would be my guess as well. Either that or shortly, very early into the '70s, it was completely drained.
The other issue that I've been thinking about that, and a lot of people don't remember this, but it really stuck in my mind. I think it was in the summer of 2012, and it was one of Ron Paul's last chances to grill Bernanke. And he asked Bernanke, if gold isn't money, then why do central banks continue to hold it? And Bernanke kind of looked puzzled and goes, I don't know, maybe out of tradition.
Yes.
Well, isn't it interesting that something that's held out of tradition, central banks are so unwilling to let us go in there and actually audit it? What's the big secret if it's not money and it's being held out of tradition? Let's see it. It's simple.
Exactly. Let's see.
That was part of what triggered the German move to repatriate. Was they wanted to come over here and inspect their gold.
Yes.
Reportedly, it's being held in 9 different Fed vaults, and the Fed would only let them look at the gold in one vault. It's like, okay, well, what do you have to hide? If it's really there, I just want to see it. I want to put my hands on it. I want to look at the serial numbers. I want to look at your records to see if there's lease agreements attached to this gold.
Yes, let's start with it's physically there. We'll start with that, and then we'll look at the numbers.
In terms of Germany's situation, again, I remember, and I don't remember who wrote it. It was a long time ago, but I remember there was an issue of whether or not the Bundesbank was leasing its gold to the LBMA because and this was like, I don't know, 2002, 2003. I wish I had saved the article. And I distinctly remember the guy saying, if it ever becomes public fact that Germany has leased out or sold its gold, the German people will revolt. Because the German people understand gold much more keenly than the American public does. There's always been an implicit agreement between the government and the people there that they would never give up their gold again. It was always going to be theirs, and yet here they are. They're in a situation where the gold's probably gone, and it's if it was a couple hundred tons, probably not an issue. You can replace that, but if you're talking a couple thousand tons that's missing, imagine what that would do to the price if the Bundesbank went into the market and said, hey, someone offer us 1,000 tons of gold. What price can you do it at?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting exercise to do. I mean, we see China taking delivery off the Shanghai Gold Exchange on a daily basis, anywhere usually between 10 and 20 tons a day. And they're able to import that kind of size into their country without pushing up the price of gold too much, at least up to this point in time. But what would happen if some entity came out and said, someone offer me 1,000 tons of gold? What price would someone be willing to sell that amount? Think about who we know really is holding 1,000 tons. Where would the Chinese reoffer 1,000 tons of gold?
It wouldn't be at 1,300, I can tell you that.
I'm not sure it would be in 4 digits.
I'm not either. I'm not either. I don't think that would happen.
There'd be a price for sure, but
there's definitely a price. I mean, but like you said, I don't think that it's 4 digits. I think that there's at least one more zero going to be included on that.
Right, 100 tons, because they know where they can offer 100 tons and probably get it replaced within a week.
With that said, you saying that the Shanghai Gold Exchange is moving 10 to 20 tons a day, I'm going to take exception to that number because of Koos Jensen's tireless work with the Shanghai Gold Exchange and his reporting on that. And it's about between anywhere from 35 to 50 tons a week. So the 10 would be about as high as I would be willing to go.
Well, actually, last night, 18 tons were delivered.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. Up until
wow.
we get a it's a very expensive 3 time a day fully on market report. It's called Gold Jottings by John Brimlow, and
okay.
It's very, very expensive. It's worth it, though, because he dredges up data that I haven't been able to replicate. Otherwise, we wouldn't pay for it if I could.
Well, then I'll eat those words. I know that
you can actually go to the Shanghai Gold Exchange website, and they report their daily deliveries. And, yes. I've been meaning to write about it, but the numbers aren't fresh off the top of my head. But it wasn't until until the yuan really started declining against the dollar, the premiums over in Shanghai were anywhere from $5 to high teens, and people mistakenly associate high premiums over there with the degree of demand, and really what it is when the premiums are high, it means not enough gold is flowing into China to make deliveries on the exchange. When the premium started coming down, all of a sudden there was a lot of deliveries being made on the Shanghai exchange. There was a couple days in there last month where there was low 20s a day being delivered.
Wow.
And that there was 1 week where there was at least 90 tons delivered.
Oh my goodness.
So if you just off the top of my head this week, I think we had 8 tons for the first few days, and then 10 tons, I think Wednesday and Thursday, and then 18 tons last night. 13 tons. I have the number in my email, but
well, and then with what you just said, Dave, it's obvious that the Chinese demand is still insatiable. And in 2013, China moved every ounce of global mining production of gold through the Shanghai Gold Exchange, maybe even a little bit more than the actual global production. India is now taking steps to relax their stranglehold on the gold market, which should reopen the known gold market in India as opposed to the underground gold market. The Shanghai Gold Exchange, and later this year or in early 2015, the Moscow Gold Exchange and the Singapore Gold Exchange are both going to open. Is this the long arm, in your opinion, is this the long arm of the Rothschilds extending their reach, or will the combination of these actual physical markets seize control of the gold and silver global pricing mechanism?
I think eventually, I think the latter is what I think is going to happen. I think the physical is going to blow up the paper market.
Do you think that? Do you see Moscow? They're moving that project forward. The Singapore Gold Exchange, which is the one that Jim Sinclair is sitting in high office on, or he's one of the officers in their development stage. You see those two along with the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Are they just going to take over?
Well, let's not discard the Dubai Exchange either. That
one as well. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's why they're being. I think what we're seeing is the transfer of political and economic power from the west to the east, and underneath it all, movement of gold from the west to the east is sort of at the root of it. I mean, it's the centuries-old adage: "He who controls the gold makes the rules."
There you go.
And anytime there's ever been a military invasion in history, the first thing that the invading army did was go and seize the gold. If you go watch the HBO's it was a 2-season series called Rome. And I didn't know this until I saw the series. It was fantastic. They tried to make it as historically authentic as possible. And I read about that when they were creating the series. They spent like $250 million, and it only lasted 2 seasons.
Wow.
Because HBO couldn't make money on it. But he had a point of showing that, like when he went into Gaul, he took their gold. And his symbol of power was a pure gold eagle that he carried on a post, and that was his signal of power. And to me, I don't think that sort of, call it a law of economics, I don't think it's ever changed. I think it's still there. I think that's why the governments are so secretive about their gold, because if the gold's not there, they don't have the power.
Right. Well, and I tend to agree with the folks that say that we actually are on a gold standard. It's just, you just can't see it. I think that, and I tend to agree with that line of thinking, simply because, or in spite of someone like Bernanke saying, that gold is a tradition or a barbarous relic or is inconsequential, I think that is in lockstep with the other lies that are a 180-degree turn from the reality of the situation.
It's funny. I was just thinking about that a couple days ago. I've kind of come to the conclusion that Bernanke really, he's so full of hubris and he's so arrogant. I actually think that he maybe truly believes that. I think he thinks he figured out a way to have a fiat currency system that doesn't need gold. I really do. On the other hand, I know Greenspan knows the truth. When you look at that essay he wrote in 1966, Gold and Economic Freedom.
There you have it.
He knows the truth. He was arrogant, but I don't think he's afflicted with hubris the way Bernanke is. Greenspan sold out. His career was saved by Henry Kissinger. Most people aren't aware of this, but Kissinger and Greenspan went to Bronx Science together. And Kissinger came along when Greenspan's econometric forecasting firm was about ready to go belly up and saved him. And so Greenspan sold out, but he knows the truth. I'm not sure if Bernanke really knows the truth.
Yeah, I don't think Greenspan is part of the club anymore. I think that, well, he's part of the club, but I don't think that he gets the firsthand information the way that Bernanke would.
Probably not. They sent him off to, I think he lives in London now. I think he has a vacation home in Switzerland. They set him out to pasture.
Yeah, hooked him up.
He surfaces and says something crazy and then everyone goes, "Oh, he's senile now," which is probably true. But occasionally, he would, when they would have those, they used to call them the Humphrey Hawkins testimonies, and then they call them something else now. But occasionally, Ron Paul would engage him, and Bernanke would drop statements, and I don't think they were slip-ups. I think they were intentional, so that people like us it was a signal to us that he's smarter than he's leading on. Where I remember one time he admitted that the current fiat dollar system was a big experiment. And the party line is that, well, the central bank functions as the gold standard does because we use our intellect and our judgment to decide what the supply of money should be and what the level of interest rates should be. And that's just BS. That's the party line. And he was great at, and that's really where it transitioned, was in the late 70s from Volcker to him, where the party line became, hey, the central bank is your gold standard. We're smarter than the laws of economics, and we know what interest rates should be and what the money supply should be. We regulate that. Well, obviously they don't.
Right.
They control it, but
they control it.
Point, but they don't. It's not a substitute for the gold standard. And I do remember the one time that he sort of dropped in there. Well, this is one big experiment. Fortunately, Ron Paul would never really follow up with that. He'd move on to the next thing and start pontificating, so we knew that he understood Austrian economics.
Well, I like Ron Paul, and I think.
Oh, I do too. Don't get me wrong.
I think I would agree with what I believe you're saying is that he missed some really great opportunities to really expose these liars and thieves for the criminals that they are.
Yes.
I mean, because, when he had, just like when he had Bernanke on the ropes in that testimony that you referred to a moment ago, I mean, he should have been laying into him when he called gold a tradition and said that gold is not money. I mean, the door was not only open, it didn't exist. And he could have just pounded on him at that point. I mean, I'm not down in, Ron Paul. I know that there's certain things that he has to do, or certain guidelines and so forth that he has to follow. However, he really should have seized that moment right there.
There were several of them over the years. When he used to spar with Greenspan, and then when he would go after Bernanke, I'm not really sure, why he never did. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with politics.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. Dave, it's been an hour. And I said that it was going to be 15 minutes, no more than 30.
If I didn't have movers coming, I'd go another hour. I love to talk about this stuff.
I do too, and it'll probably be more than I'm trying to target 15 minutes, but obviously there's a whole lot more than 15 minutes out of this conversation.
I don't know if you ever read this stuff by William Engdahl.
No.
He does great. Google him. He does great geopolitical work. I don't always read his stuff, but I read his analysis of Ukraine. This guy really knows his stuff, his geopolitical history and facts and what's going on and how to read the tea leaves. And a lot of the things that he said about Ukraine meshed with what Jim Willey was saying. Part of the underlying premise of it is the U.S. went in there to try and attack the Chinese and the Russians are starting to develop a non-dollar petrodollar, a petro-yuan or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And that was part of the impetus to go into Ukraine, was to try and blow that up. And Jim Willey said it, and then this guy Engdahl said it. And obviously another part of it was the U.S. is trying to circle Russia and China with missile bases.
Yes.
And that was a big part of Ukraine also. But there was also what's going on. There's a big movement now, and it's become visible to blow up the petrodollar.
And which is, I can't blame them. I mean,
well, they say goodbye to the dollar reserve if that happens.
Well, I mean, but you know that the dollar, the petrodollar, has a stranglehold on the global economy. Period.
Oh yeah, the petrodollar is the dollar reserve. That's the reserve standard right there. And then if that blows up, the dollar is no longer the reserve currency.
And when these countries, in particular, like Russia and China, India, and they're watching Egypt. We'll use the so-called Arab Spring 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Egypt blew up, and that blew up simply because the Federal Reserve turned the pipeline on just a little bit, and it blew their economy up. Or am I completely wrong?
Oh no, that's in there. The U.S. is in there creating unrest in all these countries.
Yes, but specifically, that's what happened with the Egyptian situation as far as their economy going to hell in a handbag overnight. Is that the Federal Reserve? What I'd read was that they'd sent specifically all these dollars into the Egyptian economy, and it created this massive inflation.
I remember reading that too. There's no question about it, and that's why Paul Craig Roberts and I had a conversation about whether the Chinese wanted their currency to be the reserve currency or not. And he had brought up a point that I mean, it was sitting there waiting to be analyzed, but he's right about it. And in fact, he told me he was over there years ago advising them against having the reserve currency, because if they have full convertibility of their currency, it gives the U.S. the power to attack the currency. And so that's why he thinks, and I agree with him now after having had the conversation with him, that whatever the replacement is for the dollar, it's not going to be a single country currency, because then the U.S. can just print dollars and go in there and attack it.
Well, and with that, I mean, you know as well as I do, most people don't own precious metals. But and a lot of the alternative news is focused on different types of collapse, you know, as far as an economic collapse or a grid down collapse. You know, I mean, what would happen if the dollar went away? What would happen to, I mean, how would we function? What would my neighborhood look like?
You'd have a barter system in place until something came in, and because if the dollar goes away, that means the government's power goes away, and that means there's going to be an overthrow of the government. At some point, I think it's been guys like Sinclair have always said, you know, keep 2 to 3 months worth of precious metals on hand that you can use for barter for that very purpose. At some point, the chaos will be organized into organized chaos, and you'll start having commerce again in some form. It just won't be the dollar that is the medium of transaction.
Right.
And actually, we should probably wind this down, because I know these movers are coming in a few minutes. But
yeah,
just
I mean,
trying to circle back to your original question. You know, how am I preparing to against my worst fears of what's going on in this country? And you know that going back to the early 2000s, people have asked me, well, what am I supposed to do about all this? And this was before the first housing bubble collapse. And I said, well, I can tell you what you need to do to protect yourself to get through what's coming. But you got to decide if you want to see what the other side looks like. And really, even if you have precious metals and a propane supply and a year's worth of food, etc., everything that we know, you know, the checklist that we know to survive.
Right.
I don't think it's going to do you any good unless you get out of the country and go somewhere that's out of the reach of big government. I really don't.
Okay. That's interesting, because I hear that more and more. Unfortunately, that, you know, the United States is going to be the new Australia, where it's just going to be one gigantic prison, you know, with the slave labor being the citizens. You know, and
it seems hard to imagine that that's really, as for doomsday and bearish as I am, you know, it's hard for me to envision that. And again, for me, it's always the issue of, is there going to be a global military conflict that breaks out before we get to that point? I think the scenario that you're talking about as a possibility, I think that assumes that U.S. government power, the global power, stays intact, and there's not a war going on.
Do you think that if there is a war, do you think that it would break out? Do you think that there would be battles fought here in the United States?
I wouldn't be worried about bullets flying. I'd be worried about nukes flying.
Okay.
I mean, part of the basis of war all throughout history was I refer to it as cull the herd. I mean,
Yes.
I will say this, and I guess we can end with this.
Okay.
There's a local businessman here in Denver who I'm friendly with, and he gets everything we do. Although he thinks it's going to have a good ending because he's an eternal optimist. But he has a neighbor who's a retired. I think he was a 2-star general. Spent a lot of time in the Pentagon. Still has a lot of conversations and contacts there. And the guy that I know asked his neighbor, the retired general, and he said, how bad is it really? And the retired general looked at him and he said, well, how much gold and silver do you own? And my friend told him, and he said, okay, how many bullets, how much ammunition do you have stored up? My friend told him, and the general looked at him and said, that's not enough. And so my buddy said, well, how bad is it really? And the guy just looked at him and said, you don't want to know. And I'm sure he didn't go into details because he doesn't want to go on record as being the guy who's opening Pandora's box about what's really going on. But
yeah,
it kind of tells you that, what we know and what we think we know about how bad things really are, they're probably even worse.
Well, all right, and I really can't thank you enough, and I really appreciate all of your time.
No problem, and a couple weeks down the road or a month down the road, I would love to do it again.
Okay, well, we'll do that then, and I'll just I'll send you an email and say, can we do it this time, and we'll just move forward from there.
That sounds great, Rory.
All right, buddy. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Speak to you soon. Bye.